Good afternoon. My name is Anne Rossiter and I am the Executive Director at SCONUL and very proudly a member of the UK PBC board. David, do you want to say hello?
Certainly, yes. Good afternoon, everybody. David Prosser. I'm Executive Director of RLUK, Research Libraries UK. I'm also a very proud member of the board.
Excellent. So we are here today to have the official launch of the UK print book collection. This is a fantastic day and I'm delighted that we got to this point. It's a huge testament to the efforts of all of those who've been involved across the community in developing this, testing it, working it through. And it's a real tribute to the sector's power of collaboration that we are able to do this work together. So we are a partnership which involves RLUK and SCONUL, but also the British Library and Jisc, and hopefully soon all of you. We are all bringing different areas of expertise and commitment, but we have this collective commitment to ensure the preservation of access to shared print holdings for our current users, but also perhaps particularly for the users of the future. There were some real immediate practical benefits too around helping to inform decision making around collection management, ensuring that we're all making the best possible use of our very valuable space. So this is a triumph to have got to this point. I am going to hand over shortly to Jane Saunders, who is going to present on what the UK PBC is and why you should be rushing to join. Jane is Associate Director of Content and Discovery at Leeds. She's also a UK PBC board member. I think you're going to see quite a lot of those today. And is also on RLUK's print storage group, which has been instrumental in getting us to this point. So, going to hand over to Jane.
Hello, thank you, Anne. And I'm delighted to be here to talk to you all about what the UK print book collection is and why I hope you'll consider joining. First, though, I'm going to take us back in time to our history of shared print endeavours in the UK. And it is on this history that the UK print book collection is building. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see a list of initiatives and reports through the 2010s. On the left-hand side, I've pulled out some of the key landmarks, starting with the UK Research Reserve in 2007, which focused on the preservation and deduplication of print journals to realise space savings whilst ensuring ongoing access to content. The UKRR proved highly successful. It has paved the way for what we are now doing with print books. And I'm delighted that the team who now manage the UKRR at the British Library are now managing the UK print book collection also. Back in 2007, when UKRR was being launched, we were relying on a union catalogue that held the National Library's data, but wasn't inclusive of all university libraries or all special libraries. That changed in 2019 when Jisc launched Library Hub services underpinned by the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, which today holds the records for over 200 libraries in the UK, and which makes it possible for us now to think about a shared approach to preserving access to print books. We took a step closer to that in 2020 when Jisc's Library Hub Community Advisory Board developed retention statements that libraries can add to their records to indicate items that they will retain. This led the print storage group within RLUK to think with Jisc about taking a distributed approach to the preservation of access to print books. With our records in Jisc's National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, we can each compare our holdings against the holdings of other libraries and thereby avoid disposing of rare items. That led us to joining with SCONUL and the British Library to develop the idea of the UK print book collection. So, what is the UK print book collection? If I could have the next slide. Thank you. It is a national distributed collection of monographs. Member libraries all play a role in preserving access to books for our wider UK community of users, and we can all reap the benefits of being able to make space savings should we need to. It works through the libraries who join the UK print book collection agreeing collectively to retain a minimum number of copies. It is underpinned by the bibliographic data that libraries feed to Jisc's National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, and that knowledge base drives Jisc Library Hub Compare, which enables libraries to compare their holdings and abide by the minimum number of copies. That minimum is 7, so 7 different libraries with a copy. And we're focusing right now on print books published 2010 and earlier. From 2011, we have widespread uptake of ebooks, so we need to do a bit more thinking about what the approach should be for print books published post-2010. So why have we set the threshold at 7? We feel that it is high enough to secure ongoing access to a given book without requiring libraries to check their shelves. We wanted that buffer in case books are missing or damaged. But it is also low enough to allow libraries to manage down their print collections, and also low enough to reflect the fact that the matching mechanism will be over-reporting scarcity. We also examined the data in the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase and ascertained that most libraries will be being asked to retain between 20 and 50% of their print book collections if the threshold is set at 7. There is a huge variety across the 200 libraries with their records in the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, and it does depend on the type of library you are as to where you sit on that continuum. If you are a very specialist library, you may find you're being asked to retain more than 50% of your collection, but in most cases, libraries are left with a large proportion of print books which would not need to be retained. So, working together to develop a national approach to print book management, the objectives of the UK print book collection are to protect the value of our national print collection, preserve access to print books at a national level, provide reliable access to scarce print material, inform decision-making in relation to collection management activities, and facilitate efficient and responsible use of library spaces. Membership of the UK print book collection is open to any higher education or specialist library in the UK, but you do need to contribute your bibliographic data to the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase and refresh it regularly. The British Library are administering membership, so you will need to contact the British Library and sign Memorandum of Understanding. And there are 3 levels of membership from which you can choose. There is the participating member, where you agree to check your holdings against the national holdings in the NBK when you are stock editing. And if you are one of the 7 or fewer libraries holding a copy, you will agree to retain that copy. We then have retaining members, where if you find that you are one of 7 or fewer holding libraries for a book, you not only retain it, but you also add a retention statement to the record for that book. And we do have guidelines available for adding retention statements. And finally, we have receiving members who, in addition to retaining items and adding retention statements, will also consider receiving copies that cannot be retained by other member libraries. However, we're keen to stress that the receiving process is not a service. It is very much a last resort. We anticipate that if libraries are under pressure to reduce the size of their print collections, they should find that they can make the necessary space savings by focusing on books where there are 8 or more copies held nationally. So, in addition to retaining books where you're one of the last 7 holding libraries and adding retention statements if you are a retaining library, we would be asking you to let us know when you run a stock editing exercise and to provide data on how many records you ran through Compare, how many records in scope were held by 7 or fewer libraries, how many were not one of the last 7, and how many you decided to deaccession as part of the process. Those last two figures will be converted to meters by the British Library team, and they will be aggregated so that we're able to monitor the effectiveness of the UK print book collection, but we won't be sharing data about individual libraries. We will be asking you to confirm your membership every 3 years. We're mindful of the fact that colleagues move on, and so we're keen to keep the membership live. And we will reach out to you annually just to check in. And if you do decide to leave the UK print book collection, there is a process for that, and we would ask you to let us know as soon as you can. So in practice, if you are a member of the UK print book collection, when you run a stock editing exercise, you would be creating an Excel CSV file of the local reference numbers for monographs that you have earmarked for deaccessioning. You would then upload that CSV file to Jisc Library Hub Compare. And the results from Compare show the number of libraries holding the same book. And I think you can see that on the screen in column H. You can then filter the results to 7 and fewer, so those are your items for retention, and 8 or more, which are the potential items for deaccessioning. And in terms of governance, the UK print book collection has a governing board consisting of representatives from the library community, including mission groups, and also the British Library and Jisc, who are providing the management and technical infrastructure. We also have an academic representative in Ruth Livesey in order to reflect the needs of our wider community of users. And the board has its own terms of reference to ensure that the UK print book collection plays a role in safeguarding and sustaining the national distributed collection of print monographs alongside other initiatives such as the UKRR. It will annually review the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, and it will review the progress of the UK print book collection in meeting its objectives, including reviewing the statistics and the data that we will be collecting. The board will also propose and consider further developments of the UK print book collection to respond to changing needs in the sector and to take advantage of new opportunities as they arise. And periodically, the board will be reviewing its own performance, its objectives, its ways of working, and it will also act as an advocate for the UK print book collection. Prior to launching the UK print book collection today, we have run a pilot. In 2024 and the first part of 2025, we ran pilot projects in 2 cohorts, and we are very grateful to those libraries who volunteered from across SCONUL and have allowed us to use their data to help us understand how the UK print book collection can work. We were really interested in understanding the support that libraries would need in engaging with the processes that underpin the UK print book collection, in giving us feedback on the Memorandum of Understanding and helping us to develop instructions as well. And we were also keen to talk to the pilot libraries about collecting the metrics that will enable us to monitor the effectiveness of the UK print book collection. We were also very interested when we ran the pilot in what the results would show in terms of the proportion of stock to retain. And you can see that the orange on the bar chart is the amount of stock that could be removed by each of our pilot libraries, and the blue is the stock to be retained. It is worth noting that Warwick, Sheffield Hallam and Manchester Metropolitan Universities all ran all of their pre-2011 print book holdings through the process. And the retention levels are very much in line with what we had anticipated when we did that initial look at the data. So you can see they range from Manchester Metropolitan retaining 14% of its collection to Warwick retaining 40% of its collection. Liverpool and Bristol piloted the process for pre-2011 print books held in their stores. And Imperial and Senate House trialled the process using a small subset of their data, of their holdings. So really it's Warwick, Manchester and Sheffield Hallam that give us that kind of insight into what happens if you run it across all of your holdings. London South Bank also engaged with the process, but because of data issues, had to run it slightly differently. So we think that that 53% retention there is over-reporting scarcity. We had really helpful and supportive feedback from our pilot libraries, and we're tremendously grateful to all of them. And you will be hearing directly from Jan at Bristol and Jeff at Warwick shortly. But running those pilots really has given us confidence that the UK print book collection is fit for purpose. We would very much like you to consider joining the UK print book collection to be a part of the national effort to preserve access to rare print books. Membership of the UK print book collection should also give you confidence in your local collection management decisions, helping you to make effective use of your library space. Success does depend on as many libraries as possible signing up. With 202 libraries already contributing over 160 million records to the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, we have a great opportunity here to leverage the value of this data to take a national distributed approach to the safeguarding of material for future library users. So please do visit the website, contact the British Library, choose your membership level and sign the Memorandum of Understanding. Retain monographs where you're one of the last 7 UK libraries with a copy. And if you can, please use the retention statements, and there are the guidelines available. So thank you very much, and I shall hand back to Anne.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jane. That was brilliant. We're now going to hear from a couple of pilot libraries from Warwick and from Bristol. What we're then going to do is take questions before we move on then to close at the end and consider next steps. So without further ado, I think we're turning to you, Jeff, first, are we not?
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, and thank you, Jane. No, that's great. So I'll introduce myself and kind of give the, not banging the drum as such for UK PBC, but our experience of it and what we've done so far. So my name is Jeff Lewis. I'm the Collections Management and Discovery Manager at Warwick, and I combine sort of 2 roles really. I manage the metadata team as well as the collections management team. To give some background on Warwick, we have a total print collection over 1 million items. Our total storage is 43.5 kilometres, and 17 kilometres of that is within our stores. Our stores are full. We've got about 100 metres left that I'm trying to save for emergencies. That was a new custom built store from 2021, which we immediately filled. And we're planning a major library development with a complete refurbishment slated for 2030. So there are a few things that were coming together that made us really want to consider sort of large-scale deaccessioning. We haven't done any major deaccessioning or discards. We do typically discard about 5,000 items a year. Most of that is duplication, so we look at material that hasn't been used for a while, where we may have 3 or 4 copies, and we tend to duplicate that down to 1. That has kind of kept us going for the time being, but we're at a stage where we are full. There's not much capacity in the system at all left for us. We were restructured in 2024 with a new collections management team formed from our previous collections support sort of shelving team, and we're developing a new collections policy with the intention to provide much more information to departments about what we're doing, and more granular information about how we've come to those choices. One of those bits of information is uniqueness, really. We've been using Library Hub Compare to identify unique materials, reviewing collections for uniqueness, for marketing and internal locations reasons. We originally tested Copac collections management tools when they were first released, so we've had a fair bit of experience with these type of tools. And we're lucky enough that we've got a collections management officer who we've enrolled into a data fellowship apprenticeship, which includes developing Power BI database tools as part of our work. So for us, this is a real life example that we can use in creating analytical tools to analyse this type of data and use it for a particular reason. So it was perfect timing for us. Our library management system, Sierra, provides basic reporting capabilities. Over time, we've developed expertise in exporting lots of data and integrating it into relational databases, enabling us to enrich data with additional sources such as reading list information, usage, and things like that. So we just threw all of our records in, 765,000 bib records. Next slide, please. And for our results, we extracted all our print data, we uploaded to Library Hub Compare. Library Hub Compare only lets you add 50,000 records at a time, so we split our whole file into 50,000 chunks. We use control numbers, so a simple CSV file of only control numbers was uploaded, and we then downloaded the results, which we could use in Power BI or other software to match against other useful data that we hold. From our results, 60% of titles shared copies with over 7 institutions, and that gives us a starting point for potential deaccession or review. But that's not the end of the analysis. We also review age of material, usage, reading list use, potential research use, and we collate these data sets and build databases that enable us to combine and search data. So the top image here is a previous build we've done, which includes cat created date, usage, total items, year published, and we add in uniqueness into that. And the bottom image is a new database build my colleague is working on using Power BI, and this shows some of the visualizations you can do in Power BI using the data and sliders to select the number of copies. We've also been developing our RLUK categories for the collection, so identifying material categories such as heritage for some of our special collections type material, or legacy, which we've identified as a category for material with less than 8 copies. So we would add retention statements in for both of those categories. And we've combined those categories to develop data to better inform departments for our decision making in relation to deaccessioning, so they can understand the method behind it. And we can also highlight that we're part of a national scheme in the UK PBC, which will hold a lot more backing behind it, rather than us just saying, well, this is what we think you should get rid of. Next slide, please. And some insights from the work on UK PBC pilot. We did some work on our metadata, identifying records with no ISSN, subject headings, notes, authors, things like that. We worked with OCLC on a data enhancement project and improved about 250,000 records. That wasn't required by UK PBC, but we thought it'd be helpful to hopefully get a better match with some of our NBK records. We do find older material doesn't always have great metadata, and material may trigger a finding of uniqueness even though they're not unique. It just may be the record hasn't matched on NBK because of poor metadata. So a review of your unique data is helpful, just to make sure you understand why it's showing as unique. We felt false positives were better than false negatives, in effect. The exercise is really straightforward on Compare. Compare provides the original bib record number for you as a file that you can download back with the uniqueness data on it. So we use Sierra as our library management system. That results file, we just strip out the control number and upload that to Sierra, and we can create a list with all the bib information on it, and then do our conversion of applying retention statements. We've added our retention statements into the bib records in the process of updating NBK with these records. We had to make sure our discovery layer could actually show the some of this bib data. So we were set up not to show notes on some, and so we've done a bit of experimenting to try and make sure that the full record is displayable. You can also add a retention statement into the record if you're planning on removing that data, those titles. So if you don't want to delete the item from your catalogue but are unable to suppress the records, you can add a discard UK PBC in the retention statement to give an indication that you are getting rid of it. And as a method of estimating, gathering data in preparation for planning work related to our future refurbishment, the work's extremely useful. We needed some understanding of what potential there was for reduction in stock, and we absolutely got that. And last slide from me, please. So, and you can see a retention statement in there, that favour 583 line in the bib record. If any of you are cataloguers, you'll see that. So why would I recommend you join the UK PBC? Well, it supports the development of data for deaccessioning planning. For us, it was tied in with building a case for deaccessioning, which we need to take forward to manage our space issues. And in communication with departments, we can provide information and show due diligence that we're not discarding on a whim, but rather we've got a solid set of evidence and a policy developed around what actions we would take before deaccessioning happens. You can be secure in what you retain, so collections management work can be targeted on unique materials. We'll be reviewing our unique collections, and in particular, looking at stock taking, moving material more into secure areas if sensible, and consider marketing with departments and researchers to highlight our unique collections. We're also interested in comparisons of our data with other institutions, so whether we can use Library Hub Compare to benchmark against collections held in other institutions. We're a strong supporter of ILL, and we want to preserve access to materials as well. So being part of a national agreement effectively is something we're really supportive of, and that we think will gain support from our departments to understand how we're making these deaccessioning commitments. I hope that was useful, and that's it from me. We'll take questions at the end, so I'll pass on to Jan Davey from Bristol.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. I'll start similarly with a little bit of background on Bristol, just for a bit of context. So I'm Jan Davey. I'm collections librarian at Bristol University. It's a slightly different remit from Jeff. I only oversee our collection management team. We have a very similar sized collection of around 1 million book items. Just around 1 million items generally. No books, around 1 million books. About a third of which are in off-site storage, so knocking on for 400,000 books in our research reserve, which is a very similar size to Warwick's. We've had ours for a little longer. We knew ours was filling up as far back as 2009 due to the sort of policy that we had in place then of retaining a last copy of any item we'd ever held. So we, similar to Warwick, were early experimenters with the COPAC collection management tool, which preceded the Compare tool. We've also been members of UKRR for a long time, and all in a bid to sort of stop our collections growing out of control. More recently, another difference between us and Warwick is that we actually have done some major relegation projects recently. So most recently, in preparation for a new library, which is currently on hold, but making space in our Arts and Social Sciences library and our off-site store. And despite having done major work recently, there are new challenges to face, and so we still had a strong motivation to join the UK PBC. Next slide, please. So we joined the pilot to unlock space for our special and theatre collections, which are now much more a part of our core library service after a small restructure. And for these services to achieve accredited status, we need to be able to demonstrate a practical plan for growth space for them, quite different to maintaining a steady state, which is what we try and do with our main library collections. So removing low use and common books from our collection is directly supporting the growth of our unique collections. Being involved in the pilot also helps us to keep the library estate generally manageable as we await a new building. And as part of the process, while we consider this, we wanted to revise our relegation criteria, which, as a result of our prior major project, were in need of revision, because the criteria that had been agreed in that project had sort of fixed thresholds and things which didn't allow us to change with time. And so we really want to build the principles of the UK PBC into a new collection development policy, which will guide the work we do in future. And in doing this, we were keen that, as much as possible, our experience in this area could be built into the UK PBC project. We could feed in and influence it as much as possible, obviously to help it develop as well as it can generally, but also, I suppose, rather selfishly, to try and make sure it works for us as well. In doing all this work, we are supported by using our library management system, which is WorldShare Management Systems from OCLC. That requires us to be quite self-sufficient in terms of reporting and analysis. So we've developed useful skills and have quick access to data, which will really help us with this project. We chose our offsite store as the subject of the pilot. It has a broadly representative stock of our whole collection, and practically speaking, it's the place where we were most likely to want to start actually removing books. And from the store, we chose what we believed to be within the building, quite a representative area to look at, a smaller sample of roughly 60,000 records to run through compare. And so looking at our results, ours are slightly different from Warwick and from other institutions. We have a relatively high figure for retention, but that is really just reflecting the fact that we've already removed quite a lot of our more commonly held materials. Because we've worked, obviously we haven't had the opportunity to be part of a national project before, but we've worked very much in this way, going it alone up until now. So despite the high retention status, the 35% which we could potentially withdraw does show that there was still a lot to be gained from engaging with the project. Obviously, we have to temper that figure because we know that we'll have our own criteria to apply to that. And so we won't actually be getting rid of 35% of our collection. We'll be taking into account usage and local relevance and things like that before selecting the material for withdrawal. But it shows how much we had to gain just from joining a national scheme and having a reduced threshold for scarcity. Just that difference to what we were using in the past, which was our own figure was 10 copies for scarcity. Reducing that to 7 has freed up a lot more space. So yeah, there's a lot to gain by this coordinated action. And just to quickly explain that the 13% retained for local needs is basically our special collections and things like that. Things that we knew we were going to retain regardless of other factors like usage, so we didn't even bother querying those. So I realised that in giving some insights, my feedback might be of limited value to people looking to join this kind of project for the first time. This process really is business as usual for us. It's a process we enjoy as much as anyone can enjoy removing books from their collection, in that we're really comfortable with how it works and trusting the results that we get. This rather bland picture in the slides is actually demonstrating how comfortable we are with this. These slides are currently empty as a result of some of the work we've done, but they've been emptied and filled probably over 3 times in the last few years as we've engaged with different projects. And it really shows how the collections in our research reserve aren't static, but are starting to kind of ebb and flow with time. But obviously in that ebb and flow, we want to make sure we retain those core essential things. And we feel like we're hitting that balance, and this project lets us do that. The scarcity threshold for the project, 7 copies, was new to us, but very comfortable. Ours was slightly higher before, but that was essentially because we were having to go it alone. We didn't have the security blanket of being part of a national scheme. There are still questions to ask about the process. I know others have rightly questioned the need to retain things like multiple editions of relatively modern textbooks, just because each edition is scarce. But frankly, we'd be retaining that stuff anyway if we weren't part of the project. And the net gain of the things we can get rid of mean that we're quite happy retaining that kind of thing. The manipulation of Compare as a shared platform is really key, I feel, to the success of this project, in that we have a mechanism enabled by Jisc where we can suppress the holdings that we're considering getting rid of from the National Bibliographic Knowledgebase, basically reflecting the scarcity as if we had finished carrying out the work, so that other people around the nation considering doing similar work are taking into account the fact that we're aiming to remove some titles before assessing the relative scarcity of their own holdings. And this is great because it means that we can act in the spirit of the project, keeping our shared data as up to date as possible, but it gives us the time to act on that data in the background while our records are suppressed from Compare, because obviously this kind of work takes a lot of time. But this mechanism enables us actually to build a project locally off the back of our engagement with the pilot, including seeking funding to actually carry out the relegation. And so it's been a really key development for us. As Jeff said, the quality of records is a partial barrier that you might have to overcome. Personally, we have in the region of 50,000 books in our whole research reserve collection, so not just the sample that we looked at before, of questionable uniqueness. And this is mainly as a result of the quality of our metadata, so we've yet to find ways of working through these. The matching algorithm in Compare maybe has an influence on that, but to be honest, we're quite happy with the way that that works, generally favouring under rather than over matching of things, and therefore not over-representing or over-representing the scarcity. And we are very confident in this process, and we were so before starting. I mean, the whole process, so not just the means of looking at scarcity. So obviously everyone will have their own criteria to also take into account around usage, statistics and age of material and local significance before deciding what materials to withdraw. And we have looked back at our statistics based on our previous work, and we have been able to measure that there were only 12 interlibrary loan requests deriving for material that we used to hold since 2019. So that's arising from the removal of around 40,000 books. So we're really confident that the criteria that we're applying when using a mechanism like this means that we're removing the right books from our collection, if you like. So off the back of all that, I would recommend joining this project for the following reasons. I found it a really supportive community of practitioners to be involved with, so lots of best practice to share. It's a flexible approach, so compared to the early iteration of things like the UKRR, which were very centralised necessarily, it was a very complex area, this is a lot more community driven, which makes it a lot more flexible for you to pick up and put down at a time which suits you when you have local need. Being part of a national scheme like this is an easier sell to sell collection work to stakeholders around the library. And while the process is quite simple and straightforward and very dependent on everyone engaging with it in the correct spirit, it has to be better than going it alone. We'll always be facing a need to make space, so you may as well choose this, which is the most responsible way to do it. For example, when we undertook our last major project, we were really itching for a national agreement around book relegation, the UKRRM, as I think it was known at the time, or mooted. And in the end, we just ended up having to go it alone. And so if that's the alternative, then I think this is definitely by far the best way to go. And ultimately, it enables you to put limited library space to its best use. And for us, that means what's represented in this picture here, which is removing lesser used, commonly held books, as shown on the left, and replacing that with unique and distinctive archival and special collections, as shown on the right. That's it for me. So thanks very much for listening. I'll now hand over to David.
Thank you so much to Jan and to Jeff. We're so appreciative of all the work that the pilot institutions have done over the past few months in testing out these systems, making sure that they work and they're robust, but also ironing out so the wrinkles and giving us a lot of really valuable information to get us to the stage of being able to launch. So this is the opportunity now for some questions and comments. I'm going to be joined by a star lineup of people who are actually able to answer some of the questions, including our pilot representatives from the British Library. I think Jane is coming back on. Joanna Little, who is the program manager for the UK PBC, and so hopefully between us, or more accurately between them, we'll be able to pick up on the questions. There's been a lot coming in on the chat. Some have already, I think, been answered, but for completeness, we'll just make sure that we're covering all of those. So if we go back and we're talking about issues around it being desirable rather than compulsory to add retention statements for those join us participating institutions, and Jane, I think you answered that one and saying yes, it's desirable for those institutions. Julie at Cardiff Met talking about sort of non-academic collections in a sense, children's books here. Julie, is the concern here that you may want to dispose of those copies? They may not be particularly rare in the world, but in academic libraries they would be particularly rare, and so you might be holding less than one of the fewer than 7 copies, and there'd be a requirement to keep those.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Okay, brilliant. Do we have a thought on that? Jane does have thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, it is a difficult question, and it is one that we have debated. And I think at Leeds, we also run PGCE courses, or did, and have material relating to those. As things stand, we would ask you to include that material in the UK print book collection work that you do. Yeah, I know, I appreciate the difficulties there, and we've also had debates in relation to kind of material that might be non-UK published material held in languages other than English. So I think that is an ongoing debate, but what we would hope is that for the time being, that you would find enough scope for your stock editing activities amongst the material where there are 8 or more copies held nationally. So yeah, for the time being, we would ask that material is included in the work that you do around the UK print book collection.
I think one of the thanks, Jane. I think one of the difficulties in these types of conversations is that we very quickly get to the edge cases, and they're the ones that can quite often begin to trip us up. And as I think Jan was saying about it being a community activity, I think this is one of those things that as we progress and find real life examples, the community will decide, whether or not there can be sort of types of exceptions for different types of materials, and we'll see how that delivers. That's perhaps not the best comfort that I can give you immediately, Julie, but hopefully that will be something that we can consider as we move forward and see how this works in practice. There was also, Julie, the question about how items must be retained. And the Jane has answered that around we are ideally looking for access to materials, but that can be physical access and digital access as well. So we're not stipulating the exact type of access that we're looking at. And I think that's picked up again on the question from Toby there about ways in which books will be available for loan. The question about is it 7 copies in 7 libraries, and if one library has all 7, what does that mean? I think the answer to that is it's 7 libraries, but I'm seeing nods.
We are looking at 7 libraries, but in an odd situation, you feel that you're the only library and you have 7 copies. Throughout this, if anything slightly odd happens, please just email the British Library, because we've kind of planned for various scenarios, but there'll always be some slightly fringe scenarios. So if you feel that you have all the 7 copies and no other library has a copy or something like that, some of these slightly odd scenarios, please do just email the British Library and we'll see if we can do something to help around that.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we move on to the issue of editions, about which I know there's been lots of discussions, but which I can't actually remember what our conclusion was on editions. So either Joanna or Jane or anybody might like to jump in, one of our colleagues from the BL on that one.
I mean, it's similar to Jane's previous answer, that for now, previous editions are seen as different, and you would have to retain them if you have one of the last 7. It is one that's been debated a bit, and I can understand why people might have some reluctance around that. We feel it might be a little bit of a hypothetical problem, and that you might be unlucky to have one of the last 7 in the first instance, but it's another one that we will keep under review. But for now, a different edition is a different item, and you would retain it if it's in the last 7. But we will, it's another one that we will keep under review and look at and discuss as a community if it does become an issue. At the moment, we think it might be a slightly more hypothetical than actual one, one that people are worried about that might not come to pass, but we will certainly pick it up if it does.
Okay, thank you. And I think that a similar type of answer might be to Matt's question about what happens if there's 15 copies, but all of a sudden lots of people think, oh well, there's 15 copies, so I can dispose of mine, and all of a sudden we end up with only a few. Again, I think the feeling is that sort of people will be spacing out their activity, and so it's probably not going to be the case that all of a sudden 10 institutions are going to be doing this sort of simultaneously. So hopefully that wouldn't be a problem. But the other caveat, I guess, on that is that we are asking that institutions regularly update the NBK, so that at any point the NBK is and Library Hub is seen as being an accurate picture, an accurate national picture of holdings, and so that there shouldn't, hopefully there wouldn't be that significant lag. Is that
there's also David Jisc have very kindly put in this ability around suppression, which I think one of the pilots might have mentioned. Certainly our website's been updated, so you can see a link around that, but because there might be a delay between you making a decision to de-extensioning an item and actually doing it, you can kind of use that Jisc suppression to kind of update the information, even though you might not yet have physically taken the item off the shelf. So that sort of should help reduce the risk around that, but there is links to that on the website. It's also just worth generally mentioning that we have updated the website as of yesterday, so you will see the memorandum of understanding and more resources on the website now if you care to look at it after this.
Yeah, thank you. A question, Maria, about the distinction between copies in standard or under standard loan and copies in special collections that are not available for loan. Are we making a distinction there? Jane, I see you nod.
We're not making a distinction, no, because what we might have in our special collections that these might be on the open shelves elsewhere, and vice versa. So, for the purposes of UK print book collection, a kind of print book is a print book, wherever you're holding it in your collection. So no need to make that distinction.
Okay. But the hope is that where possible, they can be made widely available. But
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and I guess it's best efforts there, really, isn't it? And I know that some libraries, even where they have an item held in their special collection, would consider loaning it to another library, but for use in that library. So, there are various approaches that could be taken.
Yeah. Thank you. Megan asking about potential drawbacks for libraries considering or on the fence. And Jeff, did you have any hesitations before joining the pilot, or if anyone else wants to jump in about potential downsides?
No, not at all. The only slight hesitation is who's going to be the last 7 libraries holding the bag. So in some senses, it's getting there first, and that was kind of our feeling, mainly because we hadn't done a large DX session. We were keen to get on the front foot. So yeah, I mean, you're committing yourself to retain. It's whether within that retention statement you're committing to retain for a certain period, or that will be reviewed at a later period, or a longer period. So I guess that's within your own power.
Yeah, I didn't have any concerns. I think prior to going to the pilot, I imagined the project would have more active controls to make sure that it works, but I'm still really confident that the sort of best efforts method that Jane just described is actually going to still give us a sustainable and secure collection, just because there are so many natural kind of buffers and safety nets built in the way that data is matched, and in the fact that we're looking at libraries and not necessarily at how many copies are in each library, things like that, that it will work if everyone sort of maintains that effort of acting on the data, or at least suppressing the holdings based on the data as soon as you can, after sort of sharing that data with the UK PBC.
Yeah. Ruth, do you want to add?
Just to say, I think one of the more sobering things about it is that it makes you face the reality of your metadata, and the level of errors or inconsistencies, or the amount of noise and incorrect data in it. So you need to go into it prepared for that. But I mean, it's all to the good, but it will make you sit up and think, oh, right, okay.
Yes, but so that's the disadvantage. The advantage of that is that then it's a fail safe, isn't it? Because it means that there's less matching than you would otherwise perhaps hope for. So it's that's a silver lining in the metadata problem issue. Thank you. Question about music collections, CD records, they're not included, I think. Nope. So we don't. That's the next project. Something to look forward to. Emma asking about Jisc and BK offering any support to libraries when preparing net metadata.
Sorry, I can't speak to that question, but Jisc are going to be providing more sort of training materials and training sessions. That is coming up. We just unfortunately had someone who's been a bit long-term sick at Jisc, so there's a few things coming. So there's a few things planned, but we'll also look at, are there any particular questions or challenges that come up, and make sure we've got material and training to cover that off. So yes, you will be hearing a bit more about Jisc training sessions and materials in the future.
Yeah, it's obviously in Jisc's interest to have as much good metadata in there as possible, and so working with us all to do that. And I have to say that our colleagues within Jisc have been brilliant in in working with us on this. Skipping through the chat, and I feel the pain of having to hide the type of books that I might have been reading as a child 50 years ago, which are not necessarily appropriate these days. Hannah helpfully has shared the text about interlibrary loans from the Memorandum of Understanding. Thank you for that. Graham, plans to make data on JISC hub available via APIs. I don't know if we have anybody who can answer that now, but we could take that back. Joanna, is that something that we can?
We can certainly pass that on.
We can pass that on. I don't think anyone can answer that now. Okay, brilliant. We'll pass that on, Graham, and see. And perhaps we can also pass on Michael's comments again about some experience of using Compare.
I suppose I might be able to comment on that from Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, the advice is that that we don't run it through ISBNs, that we use those control numbers. I think that's correct, Ruth, isn't it? So I think we have got some guidelines on the website that you can look at, but there is a particular matching process that goes on, so there's a reason for suggesting that you use the control numbers rather than ISBNs, I think. But have a look at the website. I think there's some guidance there.
Yeah, we've got an FAQs around Compare on the website, and like I said, there is a bit more material coming, but there is already some there which might help with some of these queries.
Yeah, brilliant. And I see Sally has very kindly answered the question about APIs, that there are APIs. And then I think we're at the end of our time. Just this quick question about from Helen about retention notes being displayed, indexed in Compare. I think based on Jeff, on your presentation where you showed that they were in
not
the data
quite.
fields.
We're currently working with the MBK to get ours to display. Sorry, not to display, but to update our records. So our last record update was 1 million plus records, because we've updated all our retention statements and done other bits and pieces over the summer. So our file was huge. So they said give us a week or so in there. So it'd be interesting. But I think that was for the August file, never mind September file. So, and I can't remember exactly when we put the retention statements in. So it will either be this month or next month they'll appear.
And so that they will appear to all of us.
I assume so. I mean, it's in the MARC data, so it's you can see it in our public catalogue at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. I feel as if I slightly rushed through some of those towards the end. I hope we've managed to. Or my colleagues have answered the questions, but we are up against time now. So thank you all for the questions and thank you for the answers. There is, please do keep on those questions coming in, and we'll be able to address some of those as we go on. Joanna, I don't know if you want to very, very quickly put us back to the next steps, or how to join slide, if that's something that you could easily do. If not, don't worry. I just wanted to close. I've certainly been involved in discussions around doing something like this for over 10 years, maybe even 15 years, and we never really seemed to get anywhere with them. There was a lot of hope and a lot of desire, but nothing concrete. And I think it is a huge testament to the very hard work of a lot of people, colleagues within the community, people like Jane, who has worked tirelessly to move this forward. Also, our colleagues in the British Library and at Jisc. That means that we are now at the stage where we can say we have gone live on this program. The fact that this is something that is of great interest to the sector is reflected in the fact that there were over 130 of you on this call this afternoon. We're going to hold a second event with the same content on the second of on the 10th of November, and already there's about 140 people registered for that. But if there are colleagues who you think would of yours who you think would benefit from being exposed to this discussion, then please do tell them or suggest to them that they might want to join that. And we will also be making a recording of this session available. So ways to keep in touch. And as we say, we're hoping that as many institutions as possible sign up. So please do look at the website. Do look at how to join. And the rhetoric at the moment is all about shared services. I think that we in the academic library community can say that we're in the vanguard of shared services, and this is just yet another example of the power of the community coming together.